Hello and welcome to Right Sports Talk. My name is Zach. We've officially made it through 9 weeks of the UFL regular season. In week 9, I went 2-2 with my predictions, giving me an overall record of 20-16. We've officially made it to week 10 and the final week of the UFL regular season. With it being the final week of the regular season, there are 4 teams that this is their last week. So they did not make the playoffs. And for those 4 teams that did not make the playoffs, this is really their last chance for their players to kind of show out and get that last little game film on tape to, hopefully impress, some NFL teams and try to get some, NFL offers. With that being said, let's get into my predictions for Week 10. Week 10 kicks off this Friday, May 30th, as the St. Louis Battlehawks, who are 7-2, take on the DC Defenders, who are 6-3. St. Louis is coming off of a win over the San Antonio Brahmas, and DC is coming off of a loss to the Houston Roughnecks. Both these teams, St. Louis and DC, sat their starting quarterbacks in the second half of their games, and it looks like neither one of those starters are going to play. So doesn't look like we're going to see Max Duggan for St. Louis or Jordan Ta'amu for the Defenders, because they are 2 teams that have made the playoffs and they play each other next week as well in the XFL Conference Championship. So they don't really see a reason to have their starting quarterbacks go out and risk injury, which I guess makes sense. So it looks like this week we're going to have the backup quarterbacks for each team. So it looks like it's going to be Brandon Silvers starting at quarterback for St. Louis, and Mike DiLiello starting for the DC Defenders. I think this will still be a pretty good game, as they are still very talented rosters around them. Brandon Silvers is somebody that has some experience playing in spring football. As for my pick for this week, I am going to go with the St. Louis Battlehawks. I just think that Brandon Silvers is a more experienced quarterback, and seeing how both teams played after benching their starting quarterbacks and having backups play, like St. Louis still played very well, still played with a bunch of fire, and DC, although they did almost make a comeback against Houston, there was a real big rough patch in the third quarter and start of the fourth quarter where they just couldn't really get anything going. So I don't really know how either team is going to look, but I do think that St. Louis has more depth and better depth at key positions, so I do think that St. Louis gets the victory here over the DC Defenders. Next up, on Saturday, May 31st, you have the Houston Roughnecks, who are 4-5, taking on the Michigan Panthers, who are 6-3. Houston is coming off of their win over the DC Defenders, and Michigan is coming off of a loss to the Birmingham Stallions. These are 2 teams that played each other a few weeks ago, and Michigan, even without Bryce Perkins, was able to dominate and have a very good game against the Houston Roughnecks. My pick for this game is going to be Michigan. Even though Michigan has secured a playoff spot, even if Bryce Perkins doesn't play, I still think that they are going to play very well with Danny Etling, and I think Michigan, I don't really think they're going to be resting a whole bunch of players, as they are coming off of a loss, and they kind of want to get that momentum going into the playoffs, as they do have to face the Birmingham Stallions next week in the USFL Championship. However, I think Houston could make it maybe a closer game. I think Jalen McClendon, their quarterback, who has been playing very well since he's been a starter, is going to have once again a very good game. I think Justin Hall, their wide receiver, who's been playing very well, could have a very good game. So I think they could make it very interesting, but ultimately I do think that Michigan comes away with the victory. Next up, on Sunday, June 1st, you have the only matchup of the weekend between 2 teams that are not going to the playoffs, as the Arlington Renegades, who are 4-5, take on the San Antonio Brahmas, who are 1-8. Arlington is coming off of a victory over the Memphis Showboats, And San Antonio was coming off of their loss to the St. Louis Battlehawks. My pick for this game is going to be the Arlington Renegades. I just think their offense is too good. Luis Perez continues to play very well. He is still number 2 in the league in passing yards. He had a couple more passing touchdowns last week against Memphis. And this San Antonio offense still hasn't been able to really figure anything out. They went back to Kellen Mond last week at starting quarterback and still weren't able to get up a whole lot of points. The saving grace of their offense this season has been running back Joshua Corbin, who actually has a chance to finish the season as the league's leading rusher. As right now he is only trailing behind Jacob Sailors of St. Louis. And I don't know how much or if Jacob Sailors is going to play this week, as St. Louis does, as St. Louis is going to be in the playoffs. But for the Brahmas and Joshua Corbin, this is his last chance. So I could imagine that he could come out and have a pretty decent game against this Arlington Renegades defense. And honestly, for the rest of San Antonio, I think they're just ready for this season to end. This is a team that went to the UFL championship last season, and since the beginning of this year, everything has gone downhill for them. Their very top tier defense from last season has really gone downhill. After the first couple weeks of the season, they lost their head coach Wade Phillips due to health concerns. So I think San Antonio and the Brahmas are just ready for this season to end. So I do think that the Arlington Renegades get the victory over San Antonio. Then your final game on Sunday, your final game of the UFL regular season, you have the Birmingham Stallions, who are 6-3, taking on the Memphis Showboats, who are 2-7. Birmingham is coming off of their close victory over the Michigan Panthers last week, and Memphis coming off of their loss to the Arlington Renegades. This game, I think, could actually be a very interesting game, as one of Memphis's victories was actually over the Birmingham Stallions in overtime earlier in the season. However, I do think that Birmingham wins this game, much like Michigan. Although they have locked up a playoff spot, I do think that they want to really keep building momentum into the playoffs, and especially since they're playing a team that beat them earlier in the season. I know they're the type of team that always wants to go out and play well and get a chance to avenge one of their losses. So I do think that they will go out and they will get the victory here. Hopefully it's a very interesting game, as Memphis has some players that can show out and try to make get NFL tryouts. But I do think that Birmingham will be able to get the victory. Let me know in the comments who you guys think is going to win this week. Let me know how you've enjoyed this UFL season. I definitely enjoyed it, especially the back half of the season. Stuff has gotten way more interesting. The game's gotten more exciting, as generally happens in spring football. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Until next time, see ya.